So what do we do? There are basically two sides to the house. Some of you might actually know us from our product, Transport Manager, which was developed about 20 years ago. It's a precursor, a front runner of what is now called Charm. It was developed by people on a project. They built this little tool for themselves, and the client said, we want that. And that became Transport Manager. In contrast to Charm, this is a couple of transports. It creates its own namespace, and you can do like whitelists and blacklists and workflows for different projects, different people. You can configure it any way you want. It takes about 4 to 6 weeks from beginning to end to get it up and running, and it works. I mean, at Sapphire, people walk up and it's like, we love your product. It's like, who are you? It's like, oh yeah, we bought your product 20 years ago and we've never had an issue, and it's really that good. Then on the consulting side, we're probably best known for OSDB migrations. In 1997, SAP developed the migration toolkit, and instead of doing it themselves for production the first time, they said, you go do it. And we were very successful in 1998, and we have done 1,000 since, 1,000 plus since, worldwide, and have never failed. An absolutely perfect track record. And so now with the coming of HANA, people have to move to HANA, which means an OSDB migration, because you're changing the database to HANA. The other thing which is very popular nowadays is to go to the cloud. So what is a migration? And you will hear these things, either an OSDB migration or a heterogeneous system copy, which is really a mouthful, so most people just stick with an OSDB migration. Why would that happen? So if you run on AIX and Oracle and you have to go to Linux, HANA, you've changed the operating system and the database, which means that to make that work, you have to use the tool set that SAP provided. There are other third-party vendors, you will find them here on the floor, that can help you with that, like shorten things and what have you. They have all kinds of tricks of the trade, but some of them are not that inexpensive, let's put it that way. A migration by landscape is about 3 to 4 months. Most of that time will be spent in testing. You have to treat this as if it is a true SAP upgrade. You have to test, and I mean test thoroughly, because they're really, I mean, they're funny, but they're also horrendous. Like, organizations go live, they run payroll, they need to print checks. The check printers don't work because somebody forgot to test that, because it was pointed to a printer that doesn't exist anymore, and IP has changed. The other thing that happens a lot, and ABAP programmers will tell you, will never use hard-coded IP addresses. Well, they do. And when you test, because you now suddenly have changed from a server, so IP addresses change, networks change, so suddenly things don't work anymore. So please be sure that you test this stuff thoroughly, because if you don't, during go live, it gets ugly. If you test thoroughly, go lives can go very smoothly. I was at one where we went live with an ECC and SCM. There were 200 tickets the first day. 197 were related to passwords. The other 3 were minor tweaks. That's what you want, just password changes. That's really what you're looking for. The other part that is important is that you do a lot of planning. Just plan and communicate to the people in your organization, and tell them about the downtime, and tell them when your go live is, and talk to your customers and talk to your clients, because you don't want to tell your organizations 2 weeks before go live that you're going live, because they are going to be pissed off at you. They need to shut down plants. They have to do all kinds of things in warehouses. The more uptime and planning time you give them, the happier they are. So that is really important. The same thing is with your clients and your customers is, hey, we're doing this, bear with us, work with us. And the more time you give them, the more willing they are to work with you, instead of telling them 2 weeks before you go live, it's like, oh, by the way, we're going live. They will hate you, absolutely hate you. The other part that is important when you do these migrations is that SAP wants to be involved, needs to be involved. If you don't, when you go live on Monday and on Tuesday you have a problem and you call them and they said, okay, hi, we have a problem. It's like, okay, yes, you're running Oracle AIX. And you're like, no, we're running SUSE DB2. And they're like, no, you don't. And it's like, oh yeah, we just did this. It's like, well, sorry. And they hang up the phone. They will literally hang up the phone because you're in violation of your contract. So you have to have them involved. They will be on standby when you go live, just in case something goes wrong. So you really, really have to do this. So why are you going to do this? This is like doing open heart surgery on your environment. And you know, most of us don't want to do open heart surgery because it's painful and dangerous and all that. Usually what happens, like in recent years, because of HANA, but other than that, you know, things got spin off or bought, and the new company that owns you is like, but we have standardized on SUSE Linux and you came from AIX. And you know, that's why you have to standardize. By going off a Unix server like HP or AIX or Solaris, they are not cheap. It's a lot less expensive to buy Intel-based servers, x64 servers. So there's a total cost of ownership that is a lot cheaper. And there's a lot more knowledge around in the marketplace for people that know about Intel-based servers. They're usually, when you switch, there's often, definitely in the 2000s, in the 90s, that people said, please take me off Oracle, I'll pay anything. And so they went to MaxDB or DB2 or SQL Server because the licenses for the databases were so much less than what they were paying for Oracle. And sometimes, you know, you were running on a really old OS like AS400, or some people, yes, believe it or not, are still running on VMS. There are still people out there that are running on VMS, and they are basically forced out because they're totally out of support. SAP won't support them, digital is not around anymore, so things like that will force you to make the change. So how do you make sure that you get successful? The first thing you have to do is come up with a business plan and really basically lay it out, like what everything costs now and what everything will cost in the future, how much it is going to cost the conversion, and basically build your business case and then go to the CIO and your CFO to sign off. Because if you don't show the numbers, they're not going to do it. Just because you think it's a cool idea is not enough. Even if SAP says we have to go to HANA, for a lot of organizations, it's like, yes, we understand we have to do that, but we really don't want to. I've talked to too many customers out there. It's like, we don't want to do this. Speed alone is not enough. There has to be a better business reason. So you have to build that business case for the leadership to buy off on. And you have to build your project team and your timeline, because there's a lot of things that we can do from a technical perspective, but there's that testing part, that 4 to 6 weeks of testing. You need to do that. I don't. I mean, I don't know how your business works. I mean, I can run through a script, but I will not really know what that means. So you have to line up those resources, make sure that your test scripts are up to date. If it's automated with HPQC, make sure that it still works. If you have manual scripts, and there are funny stories about that you know, people haven't looked at their manual scripts in 10 years, and what is on paper has absolutely nothing to do with what's happening in the system. So you have to synchronize that, and so you might want to spend some time on that instead of doing it during testing, because then everything is in total panic mode, and that is not where you want to be. You need the business owners for that, and then you have to communicate about your downtime, and the earlier you do it, the better. Also, there might be some new technologies that people are unaware of or unfamiliar with in your organization, so you might have to spend some time on training and get them up to speed. And you know, SUSE can provide that kind of training, SAP can provide that kind of training, and there are other vendors out there. So at a very high level, and this might actually look funny, like Unicode, it's like, gosh, are there still people that are not? You'll be surprised how many people are still non-Unicode. out there. And to go to HANA, make sure that you are on a Unicode, because that might mean that there's a step in front of that, or that you all wrap it into one, so it becomes a bigger project. So that is something to really look at. And then look at this. Because the HANA database, your pricing model changes it is based on how much memory you consume. You might want to or need to archive some data by shrinking your database. Yes, HANA will compress things really, really well, but the less data you initially have to compress, the smaller your footprint will be, which means that your licensing cost will be smaller. So you want to look at that. And again, there are lots of vendors here that can help you with that. Then make sure that things are actually existing, on the PAM, that everything is cool, that the servers that you're using. Remember, SAP is very picky in its certification and what, like hardware vendors and what models and all that. They are very, very picky about that. And I can tell you funny stories about just a NIC card being off and suddenly performance goes out the window. And usually this is also a time to decide: are we going to go on-prem? Are we doing hosting? Are we going to a public cloud? Are we going private cloud? Are we doing a combination of the two? So all these things basically triggers this migration. It's like these conversations, and so do them up front and understand what you're doing and what the pros and cons are. It will make the process easier. And then the last part, over and over and over, is testing. It is really, really important. And also from a business process, but also make sure that your DR works, because suddenly, IP addresses have changed. So make sure that all those exercises are done at least once or twice, and that you are still within the SLAs within your organizations, that your RPO and RTO are still being met. Now, some of you might already be on HANA, so who is already on HANA? All right, a few of you. So some of you might be on 1.0, and 2.0 is out. So do I do it? It's like, do I change? And again, it's a depends. If you're on Power PC, and I'm going to spin some bits with you. This is Big Endian. So there's Big Endian and Little Endian chip architecture. This is a reference to Gulliver's Travel, where the way you sort things, do you sort things, this 321 on the chip 321 from left to right, or is it from 1, 2, 3? Big Endian, Little Endian, and there's different chips that are doing different things. Power is about to switch from Big Endian to Little Endian. If you change that Endianness, you need to do a migration. So be aware where you are. And there are different versions of SUSE, one for Big Endian and one for Little Endian. So if you're on Power, make sure that you take that in consideration. You might be running on old hardware, and so you can't. So you have to wait, unless you're at the end of your hardware cycle, and this is the moment to do it. Then there might be features that you say, like, well, they're nice to have. I really don't need to. The business really is like, yeah, it would be cool, but not necessary. But other things is like, I really need this. I mean, for my business. Like, for example, you want to use the HANA Cockpit 2.0. You need to be on HANA 2.0 to do that. So it is a discussion, again, that you have to have with your business and from a technical perspective where you are. And there's just, things that you have to figure out, and there's not one standard answer. If there was, I would give you that. It's like, always do this. If that was the case, we consultants would be out of business very, very quickly. Anyway. So even if you don't want to go to HANA yet, you might want to run on Linux anyway, or because if you're on AIX or HPUX, server, currently the jump from Linux from Unix to Linux is a small one. I mean, there is some differences, but it's for most of us that have grown up in the Unix environment, it's not like, gee, I have no idea what these people are talking about. It's not like going from AIX to Windows. It's a different world. So besides that, you're not tied to a vendor. So if you buy an AIX server, you can only buy these from IBM and not from anybody else. With an Intel-based environment, you can buy them from Dell, from IBM, from Lenovo, from you name it. So you have a lot more choices, and that gives you negotiating power, which is always a good thing. Also, AIX, yes, it's been around for a while, and there's a lot of people that know it, but there's a lot more people that know Intel-based servers around. It's just a wider user base is out there. And it is definitely cost efficient. A Intel-based server is significantly less expensive than an AIX or HPUX server. So why us? Why would you want to talk to us? First of all, we've done thousands of them by now, and we have an enormous and incredible track record on it. The other thing is that, and here SAP is a little bit odd, if you want to do a classic, quote-unquote, migration, you need somebody that is OSDB migration certified. Otherwise, SAP won't let you do it. Now, if you migrate to HANA, you use DMO, and DMO, you do not need to be certified, but after you strip away all the layers of DMO, you still get back through to R3 load on the operating system. So what is happening is exactly the same, but it is just a nicer interface. So with that in mind, yes, you can do this yourself, but I would highly recommend you to use somebody that is OSDB migration certified. It's just because they understand the tricks below, and they understand both the database side on the source and the target, and that becomes really, really important when things go off the rails. And because we have done it so often, we have a pretty good understanding how long this will take. As I said, most of these migrations are about 3 to 4 months per landscape. This doesn't mean if you have 23 landscapes that it is a sequential process. You can do 3 or 4 in a weekend, but so it's not the landscapes itself, it's the size that really gets you. So you do your ECC one because it's like 12 terabytes, and you take the solution manager and some smaller ones with you. You can do that all relatively quickly, and then the next weekend you do the BW one with a bunch of smaller ones. So it's not like, okay, now for the next 10 years I'll be doing OSDB migrations, because that would be really, really painful. So with that efficiency, you lower the total cost of your project. All right. So SAP and SUSE, I think it's because they're both German companies originally that they really like each other, and they're not that far from each other. So there's a really, really close relationship. So when SAP decided to go for HANA, they looked to SUSE to help them develop that, and they were the first ones certified. So most of the people that are running HANA currently run on SUSE. Since then, Red Hat has been certified too, so there are some that are running on Red Hat, but most of them are running on SUSE. The interesting thing, which I think this used to be the number one reason in the 80s and in the 90s of going to HPUX, was that SAP developed all its software on HPUX. Currently, all their development is done on SUSE. So you know that, yes, you can port from Linux to Linux and from Linux to Unix and what have you. There are always quirks. So if you run on SUSE Linux, you basically know that it will work, that you're not running into strange little gotchas because there's a difference between operating systems. Let's see. I'll let you read the rest. But to me, this is the most important one. That really is what it's all about. All right, we're almost there. I have no idea how I'm doing on time. All right, so they've been around for a while. They've changed hands a number of times, but they're still a German company, and it is in that kind of like serious German engineering that they excel at. Because of that, they are rock solid, whether you use it for HANA or for anything else in your organization. They are the strategic OS for SAP, and so and it shows in the numbers as you saw in the previous slide. All right. So who do we work for or have worked for? Here, a gigantic list. Now, questions. Any questions? Silly questions.
If you have, how about if they come up and talk to you after? If
That's fine.
Question?
Yeah, perfect.
Good?
Yeah, works for me.
Do you have a booth somewhere?
We have a booth right over there, okay. 792.
All right, let's give a big hand for you.
Behind Red Hat.
Thank you for coming to our booth and presenting today.
Thank you.